Hello, everybody. Let's see. Hey, I think I might actually be a tiny bit early. And something's happening. Hey, it's all seeming good here. We have people. Can people tell me, do I sound all right? Do I, can you hear me? Can you hear my computer sounding like it's a helicopter in the background? I seem to have lost a viewer and all. That's interesting. Okie dokie, guys. I'm hoping some of you there, and I'll start popping up in the live chat in a second. Can anybody hear me? I don't know if anyone can hear me. I will have to hold on a second and hope that some of the usual suspects turn up to yell at me. Is anybody there? I think it's because I've started a couple minutes early. Literally everyone's died of shock. Come on, it's traditional for me to be late. So, if anyone's got any questions, drop them into the live chat, which doesn't seem to be working right now. Slightly disturbing. Let me pop the chat out. Hey, brilliant. Now I've popped the chat out. For some reason, I can now actually see people's comments. Yay, I have people. Can everyone just be a little bit careful? Because I can see at least one yeah, I couldn't see you, Don. I can see at least one person who's had a little bit to drink. Don. Yeah, so I have a slight problem that half my Modmin team are drunk. Yeah, that's not a good start to anything, is it? So yeah, nobody winding them up on Facebook, please. Because, they don't like it. I don't know, Bronwyn. It could be me. It could be you guys. No. We're not allowed to freeze. I think I need to just do podcasts. So this whole video thing, I'll just do podcasts. YouTube have changed the studio as well, and that's not helping me at all. Yeah, Gene, gremlins are there. Thanks, Charlie. It looks like everyone can see me now. 2 seconds. Let me see if I can sort that out. Why the heck does this keep happening? Charlie, I admit, when I said half the team were drunk, I'm not drunk. Charlie's not drunk. I have no idea who else is or isn't. Right, 2 seconds. Let me see if playing around with things actually does any good. Am I still frozen, guys? Oh yeah, YouTube's just informed me that they're not having enough video. YouTube is not receiving enough video to maintain a smooth streaming. As such, viewers will experience buffering. Thank you, YouTube. Okay, so at least you can hear me. If anyone's got any major objections to me just talking and you guys listening and getting occasional weird bits of conversation, I've got the chat popped out. Hey, I'm unfrozen. Brilliant. Now YouTube tells me the problem and is actually when I'm vanishing off. Okay, guys. So as the title says, it's low and no water change methods as a discussion. Would we like to predict what my opinions are on low and no water change methods? I was going to do a t-shirt that said, if you can't take care of it, don't get it, with like a fish in a tank and looking ill. But I decided that maybe I'm trying to be more positive about everything. So, yeah. No, Gene, I'm trying. I'll rant at the end. I'm trying to be more positive for at least the first 5 minutes of the stream. So, what we're looking at tonight is low and no water change methods. Don, you'd better be very drunk for that comment. I'm not even going to dignify that by reading that out. I'm going to actually come out and say something that may actually make a few of my mods drop down with shock. I do like some of Diana Wolsted's ideas. I like where she came through from the whole idea. I think, I hate saying this about a fellow scientist and all that, but I'll criticize anybody for what I think. If I think they're wrong, I'll say they're wrong. And there's the very drunk mods just turned up. So I think that she had some good ideas. I think she misinterpreted the science really, really badly. And I hate the way she sells it as a very scientific method. And then will quite happily admit that a lot of her fish die from disease. I think that's a bit of a shame. So as well as her books, there is, I don't know whether it's her forum or one she just really frequents. And she's always on there going, oh, fish today, or she was last time I checked, fish today are so inbred. They're dropping dead of disease all the time. It's awful. And I'm thinking, no, that's not what you're getting. You can't have a scenario where you change the method, the established method. Things go wrong, but then blame it on something else entirely. You've got to consider that, yes, I will say entirely some fish are inbred. Some fish are still coming out the bloody wild. That's not inbred, Tom, sorry. I'm just loving the comments tonight. So, before we start, I'm sorry, I'm going into some scientific terms. You do need them. For people who are very, very into science, I have tried to simplify this to some way. For people who stopped doing science at high school and were really glad, I'm so sorry. So when we talk about water changes, there's a couple of areas that we need to look at, and the first is pH/KH from that side and your cycle. The second is then bacteria, and I want to deal with those two completely separate. So pH is whether something's acidic or basic. So basic is when something alkaline is dissolved in water. That's the only difference. You can, for the purposes of this, we can use the terms interchangeably. So pH, if it's acidic, it's got more hydrogen ions, H+. If it's alkaline or basic, it's got OH-. That's all that means. A strong acid is something like hydrochloric acid. And all that means is all those little H's will completely come away from the chlorine bit of it. And now they're free to dissolve into something else, to form another substance. If that happens to be your hand, it's not going to go down well. If that happens to be, that's why you can eat through things. If something is very, very basic, it's got a lot of OH- ions. If it's a strong alkaline, that means there's lots of OH- ions to dissociate and also interact with something else. And if that is your hand, then all the fat on your hand is going to turn to soap. And I mean that literally. All the fat that you have under your skin will turn to soap, and then it'll start eating into your muscles, just to be nice. So strong acids dissociate entirely, and they have a lower pH. So less than 7 all the way down. Weak acids can also have a very low pH, but they don't actually do much. Which is why you can drink vinegar at pH 2. It's fine. Exactly the same in the opposite direction. For what we're dealing with today, we're more worried about things dropping into the acidic range. Okay. A good example of weak acid is nitrous acid, which is a H+ ion joined to a nitrate. And that's why, as part of your cycle, it goes lower. But your buffers are what stop it dropping. And generally in fish keeping, we're only looking at calcium carbonate, CaCO3. So 1 calcium molecule, 1 carbon molecule, 3 oxygen molecules. I don't know, I just did 1 for 3. But anyway, you know what I mean. That means that in the water, the carbonate bit, the calcium carbonate bit, is your KH, carbonate is your KH, and calcium is your GH. If you've only got limestone in there, calcium carbonate, it should be 1 to 1. 1 GH for every 1 KH. The reality is our water is a lot more complex than that. The water board like to put extra things in for fun. It runs through different rocks. You get other stuff involved. So, like I say, I'm generally simplifying this a lot. But if you start on this and branch out, you'll know what you need to. Right, so we're there. So you have 1 H plus 1 calcium carbonate molecule. That will mean the calcium will wander off on its own. It's not that bothered. But that will make HCO3 bicarbonate. So remember that. 1 H to 1 CO3 molecule. Okay, now things get fun. Hey, Bunny. Sorry, the dog's just come to say hello. If I add 1 gram of food to my tank, 1 gram of food, and for ease of math's sake, let's say that's 50% protein. It's not that far off, actually. I think a lot of fish science foods are about 46, 49% protein. So finding a 50% protein food isn't that hard. Your cheaper stuff is much, much lower in protein. But all you do is you take the protein content on the back. It's normally per 100 grams, so that will give you it as a percentage. So if you've got 30% food, do 0.3 times however many grams you've put in. That gives you the amount of protein you've added in grams. About 16% of protein is nitrogen. And it's that nitrogen we need to make ammonia. Sorry, Don's just messaged me. I don't know whether it was an old message I hadn't spotted before. Brilliant. Just saying the camera's being awful. Yeah, that's fine. So take your 1 gram of food, multiply that by 50%, so half it in effect, and then multiply that by 0.16. And according to the quick maths I wrote down, 0.08 grams of nitrogen, or 80 milligrams, right? So we have 80 milligrams of nitrogen. Here's the problem. Nitrogen has a molecular weight of 14, ammonia has a molecular weight of 17. So we divide it by 14, we times it by 17, and we get 97 milligrams of ammonia. So what the hell are we doing? So we now have 97 milligrams of ammonia floating around in your tank from 1 gram of food. Oh yeah, sorry, Dan, I understood what you said then. It's all right. I've had a full day. I'll tell you a bit about my day later, everyone. So 1 gram of food, 97 milligrams of ammonia. Remember that ppm, which we tend to measure everything in, is actually milligrams per litre. So if you have a 100-litre tank and you've added 97 milligrams of ammonia, that's about 1 ppm. Yeah, sorry, Coral, just take my word on it. So basically, right, now it gets a little tiny bit more complicated. Calcium carbonate weighs more than ammonia on a molecular level. And remember I said that 1 molecule of carbonates needed 1 molecule of carbonate to 1 H+. Well, ammonia is NH3. So we need 1 molecule of carbonate for every... we need 3 molecules of carbonate for every 1 molecule of ammonia. You remember, ammonia is going to truss off to nitrates, and release those 3 H pluses out into the world. No, it's not getting filled quite yet. I'm getting tempted though. I just need to get on top of all my other jobs before I start on that tank. So, what does this all wind up to? So that the people who are sitting in the back going, what's she on about? For every gram of food we put into that tank, we need 1.7 grams of calcium carbonate, 1.7 grams of buffers. Oversimplified, but just run with me there. It's about that number. So if you're feeding a food that is 50% protein, for every gram of food you add to that tank, you need 1.7 grams of calcium carbonate. Doesn't sound like a lot. But remember, 1 kH, just 1 kH, is 17.9 milligrams. So for every gram of food you need, and say you've got a 100-litre tank, You add 1 gram of food to a 100-litre tank. That decreases the KH by 1 full point. Okay? It's starting to... Now, I personally have no idea how much I add to my tank in grams. It's a fault of mine. It's now something I'm going to have to add to that. So, how often should you change your tank? Just from the point of view of KH and ammonia. That's all I'm looking at. So, just looking at buffering up those H+ ions that are introduced from ammonia alone. You're looking at needing 1 kH, you're looking at needing 1 kH over a 100-litre tank. So if you have a 200-litre tank and you're feeding 1 gram, you're only going to lose half a kH. If you have a 1,000-litre tank, you're going to lose 0.05. Sorry, guys, at 0.01 even. This is going insane. It's been a long day. So, the bigger your tank, for the same amount of food. The issue is, the bigger our tanks, the more fish we have, the more we tend to feed. So there's a crucial factor. What you've also got to consider is, not only is that going down, you're going to have to buffer it to higher than it was at the start. So if you're like me, I have very, very soft water. So I think the stuff in my water butt right now is sitting at about 2 kH, if I'm generous. Say it's 2 kH, we'll give it a generous thing. So if I put that in a 100-litre tank, and give my fish a good feed, for 2 days, I've lost all my KH. Now the issue is my pH is starting to drop because those little H+ ions aren't being joined to KH. They're just slowly, slowly crashing. So if I know I use 2 KH, 2 times 179 milligrams per litre, every 2 days, or 1 every day, then I need to know that either I need to do a water change every day, right? And I need to do 100% 80% water change every day. Or I can just buffer my water up a little bit. With my super soft water, if I'm keeping super soft water fish, then all I tend to do is add a little bit of buffers during the week. I just keep an eye on the KH and add a little bit. The second issue is bacteria. And this is where I think a lot of people forget. In freshwater, and I'm going to point this one out, in freshwater, remember, it is a nice warm liquid. Bacteria love warm liquids. If we can get the drunk mod Tom there to comment, he used to work in water testing. And in water testing, one of the first things you test for is E. coli. And that's because E. coli, if unchecked, I think it's like 48 hours before E. coli takes over the earth. If E. coli had like no limits and an unlimited amount of food, literally 48 hours, and you've got more E. coli than the waste of the entire planet, or more volume of E. coli than the waste of the entire planet. It's ridiculous how fast that stuff multiplies. And trust me, even chlorination doesn't get rid of all of it. It's a tough little sod. Or maybe you've gone the loo and you haven't quite washed your hands before you stuck it in, and you've introduced like 2 bacteria. In fact, if you've done that, you've probably introduced thousands of E. coli bacteria. Just even by life existing near your tank, it's getting some of these bacteria in. And it's multiplying, and it's multiplying quickly. And you've got waste in there. You've got everything a bacterium needs to thrive. So what do we do? Well, for me, every 3 or 4 days, I do a 50% water change. I'll always say it's easier for me to do water changes because I've got the fish house. So I don't have to worry. It just goes straight on the floor. And then when I fill it back up, I do it with a pump and a hose. So the most technical part for me is having to walk out the fish house and turn the tap on. That's about it. I turn the tap on, it fills up the water butt. I leave it for a couple of days. I buffer it to whatever I want. I start the siphon. I let that drain onto the floor. I put it at the right height so that I don't walk away and forget and drain the whole tank. I've only done that twice. The fish would survive fine. There was a little bit left on the bottom. And then I can just fill it back up. So every few days for me is nice and simple, even with like 14 tanks. So I'd say for bacterium-wise, I don't think I'd be happy unless I was doing something like at least 40% a week. Because it's still going to be giving them a lot of opportunity to double and triple. Maybe if you want to do less. So when people say, I'm not bothering because my nitrates are fine, my nitrates aren't very high, I'm sort of sitting there going, well, so? Is that really the only reason we test? Wouldn't it be better to get the bacteria out your tank and keep it refreshed? There are very, very few fish in this world that live in any form of stagnant water. Those that do have incredibly short life cycles. And the water then goes away for a period of time. Or they're the sort of fish that can get out and walk. I'm thinking your lungfish, your Clarius catfish, your snakeheads. All of these fish, in one way or another, when the water quality gets bad, they just go for a wander and find something better. Or dry out in the middle of the desert if all the water's gone. The fish that are traditionally seen as living in stagnant water, your killies. Not necessarily stagnant, but very, very small bodies of water. Now, when they start, they will have a lot of water, but consider the bioload on those is tiny. And also, crucially, they are starting from fresh because that is rainwater, not very biologically active, falling on desert. Like dry, nothing. So, yes, some bacteria will survive, but actually a lot less than you might think. And also, those fish have very little intention of surviving for very long. They know they've got a short life cycle, or nature knows they've got a short life cycle. We tend to talk about things like betta as living in puddles. Jeez, hate to hear that one. What betta do is exactly the same as snakeheads. Yeah, as Don says, lungfish, just forget. The lungfish burrow down and then form a mud cocoon around themselves, I think is the way you can describe it. And then they just go into like rumination, hibernation, whatever, avestation, whichever title they've decided on it for this week. But yeah, they are fascinating, those. They just go into suspended animation until things get better. Betta and snakeheads have a really neat adaptation, and it's interesting. And it's a case of competitive evolution. So when I'm teaching competitive evolution, we talk about the lions and sort of cheetahs and gazelle. Every generation, the slowest gazelle are caught, and every generation, the slowest cheetahs die off. So that means that every generation gets slightly faster and faster and faster, and that's why you end up with these super fast animals. Bettas and snakeheads are also in a similar arms race evolutionary-wise. They've both evolved to live on the very, very edges of shallow water. Now, the crucial thing about that is the oxygen levels drop quite drastically. So both species have evolved to be able to breathe atmospheric air. That then means that, in theory, when the betta started this evolutionary thing, they could survive at the very margins where other fish couldn't actually come in and eat them. There's not, I can't think of anywhere of natural range where those two would overlap. But they both have similar prey-predator relationships. It's just those two are the ones people tend to know. Snakeheads have evolved to wander in and eat the fish that have evolved to live on the very, very edges and the margins. However, I'm going to go out on a limb and say I don't believe it's year-round. I really, really don't believe bettas are living in those conditions year-round, because whenever you read any of the studies, the temperatures are very, very seasonal for that height. So if you look at them, the one good thing we've got is rice paddy studies. Because rice feeds so much part of the world's population, and because climate change is actually killing off rice paddies and making it very difficult for people to grow their rice, there is a massive research being done on the temperatures of rice paddies. So you can just piggyback on that research and go, well, we know the bettas live there. Oh, let's look at the temperatures. And interestingly enough, that 29, 28 that's always quoted is only breeding period, only the summer, the breeding period. So think about it from the fish's point of view. That's the point where they can go off into the corners. Nothing else can get to them. They can lay their eggs. And that, if you look at any other animal, extra heat produces extra aggression. So these very aggressive displays we see and talk about for the wild are probably temperature and hormonal dependent, and just for a very, very short period. So yeah, they will live in they'll survive in absolute horrendous conditions. But I suspect for the rest of the year, they shoot off into the rest of the paddy, or they might make their way back into some sort of stream or something. But even if they don't, the temperatures come down and we get oxygen back into the water. They probably stop using as much surface atmospheric oxygen. The hormones probably lower right down, and you're probably going to find that they go into a much calmer state. So, if you as a fish keeper are using in the wild they can survive in X as an excuse for low or no water changes, could you just stop using that as an excuse? Seriously? It just doesn't work. So, back to the actual science of this. So as I was saying, for every gram of food you add, you need about 1.7 grams of buffers. That mounts up. That mounts up really, really quickly. For a lot of people, so I'm trying to think who's there. Don, you're not too bad. You've got relatively hard water. Coral, I think you've got really, really hard water as well. Tom, I know you do. Oh, come on, everyone. I can't remember what your water parameters are. That's pretty sad. But yeah, take Tom for an example. And I'm saying Coral because I'm pretty sure they live relatively near each other. For them, the buffers can just come straight out the tap. So it's not unusual for, I mean, if Tom had 15 kH, so that's 15 times 17.9 milligrams per litre. Oh yeah, Jean, you've got horribly funny water. Your water gives me a headache. Yeah. Bronwyn, you're like me. You've got nothing. You just have water. There's no buffers in there. We have to buy our buffers. That means that you can go for a long time feeding relatively well, and as long as you do a few water changes, it's fine. Like I say, for me, 2 days good feeding and my buffers have gone. And my pH is wandering slowly down. I've got no cycle because the pH is too low. Yeah, Daniel, you're on pretty much the same water supply as me. I say pretty much because if we get really, really heavy rain, they sometimes switch me onto a more Manchester-based supply. You'll have the same problem as me then. You know, like we've had all the floods around here. Watch your chlorine. I bet your chlorine will shoot up. Yeah, Charlie, you've got super hard water. So yeah, it differs around the country. And that's why when you've got people on the group going, well, I've never had the problem, and I get fed up and have a quick look on their Facebook profile and go, you living sod in Kent? Yeah, Daniel just said, yes, chlorine shot up. It's awful right now. I have to run an HMA just for drinking water in the house. And stupidly, I didn't fill the water bus. I've had a bit of one of those weeks. I didn't fill the water butt before the chlorine all went into it. So I'll just have to double dose safe and hope. Don't think anything that needs super soft water will be getting a water change. I'm going to put the RO back on and use that. Tina, you're saying you've got hard water. Yeah, so you've got a bit more flexibility in your water changes than say I have. And again, it depends what fish I'm keeping. I would never keep a hard water fish in my water without adding buffers. I don't even keep hard water turtles in my water without adding buffers. The only thing I will own up to is I don't use, I'll use Aquador for my fish, just because it's easier. I use basically my own mix, but mostly limestone flour just for my turtles, because if my turtles wander along and grab a big mouthful of calcium flour, because like the flour doesn't always mix in properly. So the turtles wander over and grab a big mouthful that's left on the floor. Who cares? I feed them bloody cuttlefish bone and calcium flour. I'm trying to get it down them all the time. So I'm not really so worried if they have a chomp. Fish, I tend to use Aquador unless I'm doing huge water changes, and then I'll mix it all up in the water, but that'll bring the KH up so much, and then I'll add Aquador, just that last little bit. Keeps it a bit cheaper sometimes. Low water change methods, people normally are talking about nitrates. They just measure the nitrates. Yeah, I see. Sorry, Daniel's just said he's looking to get Mabuna. For those of you who don't know, Daniel lives in a part of Cheshire that is basically RO water out the tap. Some really good breeders in your area, Daniel, but they tend to all breed soft water fish, and that is for that reason. I mean, I'd be looking at something that's... See, Mabuna, I just think you're going to spend a fortune in buffers. Go for something soft water that's just as nice. I mean, is it the fact that they're bright and colourful? I mean, you could set up some sort of cichlid community, but soft water cichlid community. Or even consider going mid-sized centrals. You don't have to buffer up as high. So yeah, I can't talk. I buffer some of my tanks. I've got shiners and they need my tanks buffered up. I'm going to get Shelleys, but they're only going in a 160. So it won't be quite as bad. But like I say, you can use limestone flour. It's cheaper. I tend to use it on the turtles because the turtle pond is 8B2B3. So you can imagine how much it would cost. You can get various rock dwelling cichlids and plex from South America. It's just a case of choosing your things. Yeah, you're all right, Tina. They'll probably just like your water straight off. I mean, for example, soda cichlids, pH 9 in the wild. Miranda, with her natural water, can keep them, and they're doing fine. There's no pH issues whatsoever. Without separating plecos, because you don't have a spare tank, is there any way to stop them breeding? Yeah, just pull the eggs. Whenever you notice they've bred, pull the eggs out and just freeze them. I'll try and think of some ideas for you, Daniel. What we're talking about doing is doing like ideal tanks and tank ideas, and I'll try and think of some ideas for that for soft water. Come up with some soft water communities at some point. Remind me. Nag me about that one. Yeah, coral. I mean, I think the thing with African cichlids, bad coral. Rift Lake cichlids. There's plenty of soft water Africans. Bad coral. So I think that we've got such a variety. You just sometimes have to look for the more unusual stuff. And I think on hard water, you do have some options. I'll be honest, one of the problems is people go to me hard water fish. I don't tend to look for hard water fish because I sort of look at them and go, I can't keep them. So I don't tend to do as much research. I do need to start looking more, but generally, yeah, I just look at soft water and go, wee! Yeah, Jules. Oh, come on, guys. Southern mouth brooders. They do quite well. Yeah. I must admit, I am a big West African cichlid fan. So, back to the topic of the day. So, we got a few other questions. Rainwater. So, rainwater comes with an inherent problem that rainwater is already acidic. So, you've got two issues to consider here. Rainwater, by general definition in England, is more acidic. Egyptian mouth brooder is the other one. The southern mouth brooder is the same genus, but different species. Someone go Google Egyptian mouth brooder and then put southern mouth brooder in and get the same. Gorgeous fish. Bright blue lips. Love those fish. Really need to get a decent pair. Last lot I got had been raised young in too high nitrates. They'll drop dead on me. Miss those fish. Anyway, like rainwater. It's already acidic. So if you're keeping very, very soft water fish, and by this I mean I'm talking like pH 5. Your black water setups with your very, very low pH. Yeah, it'd be fine. If you're keeping a more standard community, you're going to have to buffer it up. And because you're starting at acidic, you're going to have to use more buffers. Did Tom just conclude it? What's the question? I was looking for the name and genus of Egyptian, the genus of Egyptian and southern mouth brooders and the species of southern mouth brooders. So with rainwater, assuming you're talking about a community tank here, I am going to say you're going to have to buffer too much up anyway because it's quite acidic and it's got very, very, well, no buffers of any practical use. So it's going to be very, very soft and quite acidic already. You're going to have to use a lot of buffers to bring it back up. I think you'd probably just be cheaper buying RO. You won't have to use any extra buffers. I think cost-wise, just RO will be cheaper and then buffer it up. Which brings me on to the next question, using RO. Now, the point was, koi, I think I remember in the question they were saying that it's quite popular amongst koi keepers. The reason is, depending on the hardness of your water, depends on what colours come through on koi. If you ever get a chance to listen to the talk by Dave Poole, he talks about this. It goes into quite depth in this. And I can never remember which way round it is. Whether hard water, the reds are better, or the blacks. It's one or the other. So if you're in soft water, either red or black is better. And if you're in hard water, the other one is better. And I can never remember which way around it goes. So koi keepers will quite often adjust the water depending on the particular type of koi they're keeping, because they want those particular colours to come through. And let's be honest, if you're spending thousands, thank you, Tom, that's the one. If you're spending thousands on like a particular colour of fish, you want it to look your best. So like an RO thing would absolutely not worry. What is RO? RO just has everything stripped out. And actually, I'm going to... tiny rant. Sorry, guys. Right. When you're in a lab, and come on, Tom, you know what I'm talking about here. When you're in a lab, we have something called like the standard set of conditions. And they are 1 bar of pressure, room temperature, which is normally considered 25 degrees C, bloody hot room, and RO water. And that's the crucial thing. In southern mouth brood is the one I prefer. Pseudocremia blurus philandra. Yeah, that one. Just anybody who wants to know, just go and look at Tom's comment. So that's our perfect conditions. So whenever we say under standard conditions, we actually mean RO water. Then we throw in some numbers. So we say under standard conditions, 30 parts per million of CO2 will dissociate to form carbonic acid, causing 1 pH drop, so from 7 to 6. And by the way, RO water is only neutral at room temperature. Drop the temperature or raise the temperature, and it actually changes the pH. So when people go, RO is always pH neutral. No, it's not. It depends on the temperature. But at room temperature, and for us, as long as it's there, it's fine. It's just a minor little point. So when people who only just about understand the science come in and start quoting things, sometimes you have to go to them is, the issue is that you're right, under perfect conditions. 2 secs. Go lay down, buddy. Stop growling in the background. Go lay down. Sorry, guys, just while I shout at my dog. So what people need to start doing is understanding that water chemistry, I love it. It is fascinating, but it is very, very complicated. And one of the big problems is that you throw in one minuscule thing and all of a sudden it changes. Now, just a little aside, been at a turtle conference all day. One thing that's made me a better fish keeper is being a reptile keeper. One thing that's made me a better reptile keeper is being a fish keeper. And one thing that's made me a bit better on both is listening to the Salty Lot talk. Because they've got a better grip on their parameters than any of us freshies do. They understand the importance of knowing what the hell's going on in your water. Even down to, like, does an open top tank lead to more CO2, which leads to a change in pH? The answer is yes. So there's nothing wrong with trying to get a grasp on science. But please do not strip down an incredibly complex subject into black and white. I mean, don't get me wrong, I've just thrown a load of numbers at you and said this is what happens. That is fantastic as long as there's nothing else playing around with it. And once you throw in any slight variable, things start to change. But you've got to have somewhere to start from. Oh, and by the way, this is all complete rubbish if you've got an ocean-free hydra. There's fun, because that uses the KH up to actually work. So, problems with that already. So yeah, RO water, is it worth it? Yep. I use it all the time. Buffer it back up. Yeah. Some reefers with open top tanks won't open their windows. That's how delicate the water chemistry can be. Seriously. It's that level. We don't actually tend to... Oh, hey, Stephen, I've got your question. Your question was on changing hardness. I'm going to hit that one in a second. We don't actually have to... As fresh water keepers, when it's not that delicate. But the reality is, without decent buffers, I can see that source of change. Seriously. In the fish house, if I leave the fish house door open, I notice that my black water tanks will actually lose 2 or 3, 0.2, 0.3 on the pH scale. So it'll go down from, say, 5.7 to 5.5 or 5.4 because I've left the fish house door open. Partly temperature dependent. But it shouldn't be too much because that tank's well heated. You can see these things start to adjust. And we've got to be aware that it's an incredibly complex subject. And we have people like Jean, whose water gives me a headache because it won't obey any of the rules. But something's going on there. And one day I will figure it out. Or die trying. It's options. So what do you need? What do you do if you need to actually change your water hardness? And then we will go back to actually talking about the topic. So changing hardness. So how do you tell what your hardness is? You just literally measure your KH and your GH. Now, little thing. Could people stop saying that KH has to be lower than GH? They are two separate things. There's this rumour that's gone into fish keeping that GH is general hardness, as in everything, and KH is a part of GH. GH is your calcium and your magnesium, although a lot of fish kits only measure calcium. Your KH is your carbonates. Now, how are they linked? Because they generally come in the water connected in that calcium carbonate, magnesium carbonate. So now here's one. How, if you live near Buxton, seriously, the dog has just noticed we've got a bearded dragon. We've only had her about a year. Bonnie, you're an idiot. Come on, come lay down. So if you live near Buxton, you're on dolomite, which is calcium magnesium mix. It's a limestone with a high amount of magnesium. Now magnesium carbonate could therefore exist. So if your test kit is only measuring for calcium, it'll ignore the magnesium, but you will get extra carbonates because of the magnesium carbonate. So yeah, quite straightforward example how you can have higher KH than GH. And a great example of the number of fish keepers who tell me I'm wrong, and I'm sitting there thinking, am I really? Would you please like to explain how I am? On that one, Daniel said, is he bad for only ever testing KH and ignoring GH? KH is the one that tends to vanish and crash your tank. It's worth knowing what your GH is, though, just so that you know what the hell's going on. Especially if you've got super soft water and your fish might be using it all up. So, they're both important. They both measure different things, but they are the overall thing we refer to as hardness. I have soft water. Daniel has soft water. Our KH sits at about 2. On a very good day, maybe about 4. There's a little proviso on that one. Both of us get our water from the same source, and one of the tributaries of the river it basically just disappears. So as you come down the river, it's quite interesting. It goes past loggerheads in North Wales. and then it comes down, and then the river just vanishes. It's gone into an underground limestone channel. Now, that used to reappear further downstream. However, that now vanishes off and goes into a mine and is pumped out directly downstream into the River Dee, downstream of the water intake. If we get massive amounts of flooding, that river actually fills back up again and spills into the main channel. Did I mention it falls down a limestone cavern? It's only a very small amount of limestone, but it's enough that it actually shoots our water hardness up. We get to about 4, maybe 6 if we're really lucky. Last winter, my KH hit 8. That was when I started to panic a bit, because none of my fish like it that high. So when people say my water's the same as it's always been, I'm thinking, well, hold on, you live relatively near me and we've had 3 days of rain. I know my water's changed, or you could be on a similar situation. Yeah, it could be Gene. There'll be something on there. Might be something weird. We'll track it down eventually. So it's always worth testing for you, Daniel, and like me, test your water before you do water changes, because it could be all over the place. If I'm in a rush, I'll just test pH, because it tells me whether the temporary buffers are out. I don't bother testing KH in my water or anything really until the temporary buffers have buggered off. Our water gets buffered up quite drastically, and it's awful because it messes with the test. So it comes out the tap at about pH 8.5 some days. Leave it for 2 days and it's down at 6.7. So my water's a bit screwy. How do you change? So you just measure your hardness, and ignore what it says on the bottle about 6 being perfect. It depends what your fish are. So Malawi tend to like about 15. Cribs tend to like about 4. Angels, 6-ish. Summer pistos like it at 8. Summer pistos like it at 2. Should you let water stand before testing pH? Yeah, and KH, to be honest. Like I say, you might have screwy water like mine. The only thing is you guys are in a hard water area, so I doubt they're buffering too much. But they might be buffering down temporary buffers to prevent limescale buildup on the pipes. 24 hours. I leave it to stand for 48 just because I'm in that. So Coral asked, how long should you leave it to stand for? I leave my water 48 hours before I do anything with it because I've got that set up. I've got 2 water butts. So what I fill today will be used in 48 hours time. What I filled yesterday, I will use tomorrow. So yeah, overnight, 24 hours, something like that. If you guys have ever bothered to read the drinking water safety things on your supplier's website, most suppliers tell you to leave your water 12 hours before drinking it. And then throw it away before you... So leave water to stand for 12 hours before consuming. Discard after 24 hours unless refrigerated. Just say that somewhere. I remember reading that and going, huh? And it was to get rid of the chlorine. But yeah, and the reason you discard it after 24 hours is because you've got bacteria growing in it. It's one of those fun things that your water supply forgets to say. Yeah, if only there was a lovely chart for these hardnesses. Yeah. So Tom's just passed it over. His start of the chart. The reason I say start is I want to add lots of more lovely fishies. So we are working on getting a hardness chart out for all the different species, and we're working on getting ideas of tank ideas. So like full stock that can all live together, all like the same parameters and all this sort of thing. Yeah, so Carl, the problem is if you're putting the water straight in your tank and it varies. So what I do is test how much it varies from when he comes out the tap to 24 hours later. So it's a case of like I say, for Daniel and I, it'll come out really high in pH, still super soft, but then it'll drop drastically over the next 24 hours. Now, the last thing I want to do is put that into my fish tank and then have that drop happen in the tank, which is why I use water butts. I'm aware it's not always possible in the house, and I will be honest, that's why it can be a problem. So changing hardness. If you have soft water and you want to lift it, you just don't add pH up or pH down. That adjusts the pH, but not the hardness. And actually, it's not the pH the fish really care about, it's the hardness, even though pH swings can cause problems for them. So you want a stable pH, but you also want a KH high enough to lead to a stable pH. So if you want it up, you add buffers. I tend to use JBL Aquador. There are a multitude of brands. They're all going to be the same thing. They're going to be calcium carbonate with a few bits added. To move down is a whole different kettle of fish. The easiest way is to add RO. I will be honest. If you live in the middle of nowhere and you know, say you live mid Wales, and you know that the rain cloud has just come over the Irish Sea, over the Atlantic and over the Irish Sea, you presume it's not carrying too much pollution. Therefore, what you can do is you could use that rain and buffer your hardness. However, that's a really bad example, as mid Wales is super soft water. I'm afraid to say most of you guys who live in hard water conditions, you're not getting the rain from clean areas. Feel free to correct me, but just track where your rain's coming from. Remember where it's picking the water up from and where it's gone over. So if it's gone over a city before it's got to you, it's going to have picked that up. So yeah, that's where you start to get the problems. I mean, I know Daniel's in a soft water area, but he's relatively close to a rather large factory that gets fined relatively frequently for releasing chlorine into the environment. Last thing you want to do is put that into your tank. Not all rain is bad. I'm not saying we're going to start melting, but you're starting to play a bit of problems with it. If you want to move your hardness down, I would just add RO. So I know Miranda uses 60-40 tap to RO on some of her tanks, just because we were discussing it last night. I sometimes use RO because our water changes. And if I'm trying to keep something stable, I will use RO and buffer it back up to whatever I wanted it to. So that's what I tend to do. So hardness is the little sponges that soak up all the acids that want to change your water and change your stability of your pH. It is just dissolved limestone. Easiest way to think about it. Dissolved limestone, and that stops your pH moving about, and it keeps your water stable for your fish. Spotless water stations, yeah, so they're becoming really big amongst marine keepers. I'm in a position where there's not one near me, and I think that's partly because a lot of our window cleaners could just use tap water. Genuinely, I suspect a lot of our window cleaners around here use tap water. Although, having said that, my cousin's boyfriend runs a company and he's in a pretty soft water area, and I think he uses RO, but I could be talking rubbish there. So what are we talking about? Spotless water stations are meant to be RO or close to RO water all over the country. And if you sign up, you get like 20 quid's worth of water free. My issue is there isn't one close enough, and not really that bothered. But also for Daniel and I and other people on here, Bronwyn, you'll be the same. Don, you won't be too bad either. We don't change our membranes that often because our water's so close to RO anyway. We're not removing a huge amount of stuff, so that means it's relatively safe for us to just keep on using the same. I'm no more pulling out things like heavy metals, so my first stage filter goes a lovely rusty colour within a few weeks, and that one gets changed out. If you are using RO, people, make sure you're rebuffering. Seriously, I know a lot of people use RO, or even if you're using HMA, make sure you're adding stuff back in. I'm saying, so how long do you reckon you'll get out your membranes and resin before the TDS starts to rise, Don? You got to remember, for fresh water, we don't need to worry that much because remember, they could survive on our tap water. So I'm perfectly happy to let mine creep up. Yeah, so RO. So Dundee water is super soft, but it's still not soft enough for marine tanks, in that there is stuff in there that'll mess around. When you consider for marine keepers, they dose everything down to the like tiniest level. So what that means is that if you've got something else in there, that will mess with what they're dosing. So they want to strip everything out and then only add in what they control. Yeah, you're slightly different on that one, Don, with the saltwater tank scenario. Like I say, because it's freshwater, I'm not that worried. There you go, Tom. You have no excuse now. Start taking your water a bit lower. So yeah, 3.5 pence a litre plus VAT. I have to run up. I'm not on a water meter. Soft water, not on a water meter. It's not really worrying to me. If I ever do go on a water meter, I'll definitely be looking at it. But there's not one round here yet. I think I'd have to travel most of the way to North Wales to get it for me. So yes, if you want to up, you... sorry, Coral, if you're using it, could you get a decent test on the water for me? Just find out what the TDS is for me, please. TDS, for everyone else, stands for Total Dissolved Solid. It's a measure of everything in the water. In theory, RO should have 0. Let's see what it is. Yeah, so that's the other one, using it to top up. If you ever top up due to evaporation, people, please use RO. Even if you're in a soft water area, it does gradually build up. So, yeah, low and no water change methods. I'm not a fan. Once your KH is depleted, your TDS drops. Your issue is then old tank syndrome. Now, all old tank syndrome is, once your KH is used up, your pH starts to drop. Once your pH starts to drop below 6, your filter bacteria die off and your filter archaea die off, archaeobacteria die off. You are now in a situation where you have no cycle. But it's all right. The low pH means your ammonia is tied up as ammonium. Ammonium is relatively safe. I run black water tanks that have presumably got ammonium right now. They do have plants in, so they might not, but I'll go test later on. I haven't done water changes for 3 days. Bad me. So you've now got low pH and relatively safe ammonium. You do a big water change and bring that pH back above 6. It's all right, Tom. I don't have a TDS pen either because I dropped mine in a fish tank. They don't work after that. And I think that's unreasonable. Who in the hell sold me a pen that needed to go in water and wouldn't work when I dropped it in the water? Ridiculous. So yeah, if any sponsors are out there and you want to test, please send me a new TDS pen. I promise not to drop it in the water. And if I do, it's entirely my fault. So you move your pH up, your ammonium becomes ammonia and poisons all your fish. Old tank syndrome. KH goes, pH drops, cycle stops. You raise the pH by doing a water change. Ammonium becomes ammonia and dead fish. Which is why you get older fish keepers going, every time I do a water change, they drop dead. Yes, because you've got old tank syndrome, you idiot. If you were doing a low water change method, you have to get over that. And by the way, I'm going to say this again. This is for fresh water only. I'll talk about salt in a second. Problem 1. You've got bacteria buildup. Do you know what loves no water change methods? And that would be mycobacteria. And yes, I'm talking about TB bacteria. So fish TB is a great example of mycobacteria. Mycobacterium marinum. There are 3 strains. Marinum's one of them that causes so-called fish TB in fish. Marinum seems to be the main strain that causes fish tank granuloma in humans, which can kill in one case. But even if we take that out of the equation and just look at cases, it's antibiotic resistant. You are looking 2 to 3 years treatment to get rid of it. It's a sod. So low tank, low pH, low water changes, high amounts of organic favors things like fish TB. What it doesn't favor is things like fish, because they need the KH and they need the GH. And you can't add buffers back in without crashing it, without your dead cycle coming back to life and having ammonia. So how do people get around this? They add buffers. And don't get me wrong, I've sometimes added buffers between water changes on when I've got very low KH and my fish don't like it. So I have done that. But I am talking about when I'm going 4 days without a water change. So I'm still dealing with the bacteria there. So you can deal with the KH by adding buffers. I will perfectly happily acknowledge that. You can get rid of the nitrates by having a very heavily planted aquarium. So the Wallstead method has changed drastically over time. So when it started, the idea was you put down an organic base layer. So you put down an active substrate. She was very heavily, I think she used to say soil and peat and things like that. So you put down that layer. You heavily plant it. And I mean you heavily plant it. You then lightly stock it. The reality is her lightly stock and my lightly stock are quite a way apart. But you lightly stock it. And you add buffers when they go away. The theory behind that is, if you're adding the buffers, you're not going to get the pH crash. Your nitrates are being taken up by your plants. And because you've got an active substrate, you should have good bacteria to outcompete the bad bacteria. Perfect world, that will work. I'll say it now. The one thing it isn't dealing with is fishy hormones. So you've got a buildup of fish hormones in there. It's not removing physical waste, but maybe you're looking at some sort of active substrate so that there's bacterium digesting the waste, maybe. She now gone to overstock. So Carol's saying she now recommends overstocking and overfeeding as a fertilizer for the plants, basically. Great, that gets it even better. So fish hormones are the one that really worries me. The amount of nitrates a plant can take up isn't as much as you might think. It can take up a lot, but consider that if they're taking up a lot, they've got to be doing a lot of growing. If they're doing a lot of growing, then they're taking up a lot of the nutrients you're adding as well. So you've got problems starting there. You're going to have a very, very heavy lighting. It's going to be really heavy light. If you've got heavy light, you're probably going to end up with algae because you've got a lot of nutrients messing around in there as well. I think balancing that is going to be almost impossible. It's going to be a lot of hard work. I mean a lot of hard work. Where does no water changes work? Marine. Right? But we are talking about Wayne. For those of you who don't know, head over to Marine and look at the amount of work Wayne puts into his marine tank. I mean, not just saying Wayne. I'm not saying the rest of my team isn't amazing and does the same. I just know that Wayne's the one who tends to put all his stuff up. The people who are doing this, they are dosing in micro amounts of different minerals. They are sending them off for tests that come back and tell them to within the micron how much of different minerals and nutrients they have in that water. They're then dosing to deal with that. They are growing algae to be removed to remove the nitrates. They have specific lights for specific things in there. Crucially, they are using protein skimmers. Sod off, Don. You yourself know that you've got a different setup to him. And I did say the rest of my team, but you're a freshie. Sod off with your salt water for a bit. We are talking about, and as Don said, you've got things like you open a window and you change your pH. That's how finely balanced a marine tank is. But there is a crucial one in marine that we don't have in fresh water. Hormones are proteins. Hormones are made by protein synthesis in the cell. Okay? Proteins can be bubbled out of salt water by a skimmer. We can't do that in fresh. The specific gravity is not high enough. We can't remove hormones from fresh water in the same way as we can marine. So the hormones have got to stay. unless you're running an ocean-free hydra. They might do it because they've got a free radical. It's basically a free radical producer. So it will change every protein going in there. If you wanted to do something like that, the Wellstead method, and you wanted to balance it, and you could figure out a way of getting rid of the protein, and you could guarantee that your bacteria level. So say tomorrow someone goes, right, Ruth, there's 10 grand, set up a Wellstead tank. I don't think 10 grand would do it, to be completely honest, but let's just say I get to try. What am I doing? I'm sending off for lab testing for my water on the terms of the minerals. Every month at least, maybe twice a month. I'm getting bacterial testing done every second week because I want to know what the different quantities of bacteria are in that tank, and I'm going to have to balance them. That tank's going to be monitored within an inch of its life. Charlie, you showed us a picture of your tank last week where we were talking about counting fish, and basically you couldn't see the fish for the plants. It's going to have to be about the way you're going to need it. I wouldn't be overfeeding my fish. I'd be, actually adding fertilizers. It's a weird idea for people. You see, Charlie said there you'd have to be in a constant grow it, cut it right down, grow it again cycle, but you pretty much can't because that's going to change the balance too much. So I think you'd be in a scenario where you'd be having to cut like certain plants right back until you'd be having to cut your plants every day. And they'd having to be growing quick enough that you'd be able to cut some plants every day. So you're now talking about really high... It's going to be technical. If you want an easy life, just do your damn water changes. Simple as on that one. Do your water changes. Roughly know what's going on in your tank compared to... I mean, like I say, I test on my tanks when I'm bothering with a full test. I'll explain that one in a second. I check my ammonia, my nitrites, my nitrates, my KH, my GH, and my pH. When I'm doing things quickly, I just tend to test for ammonia and pH. It's like I'm rushing off to work and something doesn't look quite right. Ammonia, pH, yeah, that looks fine. Oh hell, that looks bad. That's nothing compared to what you'd have to test if you wanted to go on no water change methods. I have no idea what my magnesium levels are. Honestly, couldn't tell you one of my tanks what my magnesium levels are. I don't check for phosphates. I don't check for magnesium. I don't check for aluminium. Now remember, you are going to probably lose water. So are you going to top up with RO? If you're not doing any water changes, because remember, if you do any water changes, you're going to send everything out of whack. How are you cleaning your filter? So you're going to clean your filter and then what? Top up with RO only? How's that going to change everything? Okay, you want my honest opinions? Taking Diana Wellstead out of the question. I think she had ideas. I think she ran with the ideas. I don't think her ideas stand up for scientific scrutiny. However, I think she was trying something. And I think she was going somewhere and her heart was in the right place. I'll come back to that one in a Bronwyn. I'll hit you that one in a second. The bulk of people I see coming on my group, and I'm sorry, people, if this sounds like you, if you're going to take offense at this, I'm probably talking about you. But the bulk of people coming on the group going, can I do a no water change method, are doing it because they are sodding lazy. They don't want to get out. They don't want to once a week walk over to the tank, take some water out, put some water back in. Right? It's not that difficult. If you can't do the basics, and for me, the basics is to take the crap out of a tank and put some fresh water in. If you're not willing to do the basics with an animal, you don't deserve to have them. Straightforward. Seriously. It's not a complicated thing. I am not talking about that 1 week where you go in hospital and you can't do anything. Okay? I've spent a couple of weeks in ICU a few years ago. Trust me, my water changes did not happen. Okay, I'll be honest, it didn't happen for a week after I got back because I wasn't feeling up to it. My pH was in the pan by the time I was able to do water changes. I had to spend so much work getting it back up to normal that it would have probably been better to check myself out of hospital, come home and do the water changes. It wouldn't let me for some annoying reason. It's the basics. It's like, I mean, I was going to go with that one, and then Don sort of beat me to the punchline on that one. Do you know, I think people who won't do water changes are the same people who let their dogs crap all over the pavement and don't clean up after them. I reckon it's the same people. And then go, but police horses poo? Really? Really? That's your... People need to stop saying, I'll be honest, a big pet store, and I can't say more than that. One of the main buyers for a big pet store is on my friends list. And he said, our care is far superior to that of many Asian countries. And I was this close to replying. And you can roughly imagine what I was going to say. Seriously, our animals need the basics. And I don't care if Grandad kept them in a bowl. Fantastic. Grandad was an idiot. Okay? Fish are animals. Turtles are animals. I've been at a turtle conference all day. Reptiles are animals. I know. My neighbour leaves his dog out in the rain. Okay? His dog is out. Last time it was raining, his dog was screaming. He locked it in the coal hole. Oh, it winds me up. Does not give me the right to do the same to my dogs. Just because 2 doors down, two doors down that way. I can do that one because there is no 2 doors down that way. And 2 doors down that way doesn't have fish either, so it's fine. One of my neighbours has got a tiny fish tank. They've got an absolutely stunted fish in there. Winds me up. Does not give me the right to not take care of my animals. Okay? As Don says, people need to see pets as animals and not items. You do not have the right... You do not have a God-given right to own an animal. If you want an animal, you make a choice. I made a choice to buy fish. I made a choice to have a bearded dragon. I made a choice to have tortoises. I made a choice for every single thing in my house. I made that choice. The choice might have been, yes, I'll take it off you, but it was still my choice. My tortoises over there didn't go, do you know what? We'll choose Ruth as our owner. They were brought here in a box. No choice in the matter. Okay? Therefore, I have to give them the best care I possibly can. Minimums don't cut it. Now, I'm going to add something to this. Pet stores tell people absolute rubbish. And we have a very, very bad culture for fish keeping in this country. There's about 10 million of us keep fish. Okay? Very few of us, very few of those 10 million I would consider fish keepers. I'd consider them people who have fish. And it's a minor distinction. I think fish keepers actually are trying to do something. I think the question is, if you were asked what are your hobbies and you throw fish in there in the conversation somewhere, you're probably a fish keeper. If someone says, what are your hobbies? And you give like 10 other things, and then they go, oh, you've got a fish tank. And you go, oh yeah, so do I. So I have forgotten all about them. Then you're probably not a fish keeper. And I think some people are trying to make that step up. And I think we need to be more welcoming to them. And we need to be nice in the way that we say to them, oh my God, your fish are going to outgrow that tank. Because it scares them off. And I think we as a hobby are really, really unwelcoming. And that doesn't help the fish. And by the way, I'm not saying, guys, just ignore. I'm not saying walk around as the three wise monkeys ignoring cruelty on the group. But what I am saying is, can we not scare people off? I wasn't joking, by the way, on going on a mass delete. I don't think I've seen anyone in this comments that would get deleted. In fact, I haven't seen anyone in these comments that I'm even considering deleting. But people will start vanishing if we don't start being nicer to newbies. So yeah, Daniel says he's got a dog, a cat, a snake, a fish, rabbit, and yeah, that's the thing. Someone asked me how many animals I have today. That's a scary thing. So I've got 19 turtles, 3 tortoises, an iguana, a bearded dragon, 2 dogs, a feral cat. I don't know whether he counts as mine. 14 tanks set up right now. 3 ponds set up right now. A magpie that bullies me into feeding her twice a day. I've got too many animals. And I am getting chickens and a snake very soon. You haven't started getting abuse off anyone yet, Don. Just you wait. I feel sorry for Tom. He's got Miranda and Sue to pick on him next week. That'll be fine. When do I find the time to sleep? Not that often. But no, I mean, I don't have a TV. That's one thing. I must admit, I do watch a bit of TV on my phone, but that's in the fish house when I'm doing water changes. You know the boring bit where you've got to stand there and do something for a bit? That's why I've got the fish house. If I had individual tanks, then it would be... If I had individual tanks around the house or something, I'd never have time to do anything. So that's why I've got them. I mean, even this thing, this looks like it's in an office and it's fine. The door is literally just there. So I've got a nice big hose that goes straight out. Water changes will be simple on that one. The one on the bottom might be a little bit more difficult because I can't just siphon it. But I'll probably just get a pumper in there and deal with that. Nobody here heard me threaten you, Don. I've got witnesses that I'm sweetness and light to you. But yeah. So yeah, it just winds me up so much that I think low water change or no water change people, for me, they epitomize lazy fish keeping. They really, really do. Fresh, not salty. I'm going to say that again. Salty's a whole different ball game. I'm talking about fresh water. And I think some people have come into this through bad advice. The way I always look at it, I didn't take a course on how to keep my dogs. No point in my life did I go, oh, I want to keep a dog, I'm going to take a course. And I think most of us who've got dogs are in the same, like our family had them or something like that. So for me, my entire family is here because of a dog. My grandma gave up her black lab during the war, and the dog's handler. So you could, during the war, you were told not to keep pets because of the feeding them, and a lot of people killed their dogs just to get rid of them because no food during the war. My grandma couldn't do that, so she donated her dog to the RAF. And the dog ended up patrolling the Isle of Man, prisoner of war camps on the Isle of Man. So she gets a message that the dog's handler is coming through Lime Street Station to go home to his home in Nottingham. Would she like to meet up with him so she could see the dog? Which she did. And she then, a few years later, married the dude. So my entire family's here because of a black lab. But they were dog breeders. So we've always had things in our family, dogs in our family. And yet some of the stuff that I know grandma and granddad did, because it was all right at the time, I consider like animal cruelty today. Like they used to wrap a elastic band around the tails to dock the puppies. I grew up sailing around the world on a boat. One of the problems with being on a boat out to sea, like we were out to sea for maybe 3 to 6 months at a time. And you accumulate waste in that time. And we used to throw it overboard. And that just shocks me now. I mean, it was when I was much younger. And it was mostly metal. So I hope it's all gone. But geez, when you realise you've done that, you're like, I can't believe I did that. But that was what everyone on yachts did at the time. And still today, I know a lot of commercial boats just chuck their rubbish over. So I can see, looking back, like I've done things in my life that I'd scream at someone for doing now. It's just like horrific. But I'd like to think I've learned and I've changed and I'm moving forward with my life. And I think we need to understand that in fish keeping, a goldfish in a bowl is still an acceptable thing. There's a Facebook group and I can't find it and I really want to find it. And it's Being Refused Fish by Pets at Home. You occasionally get screenshots in there. I've like seen them in the newspapers and stuff. And people are going, oh, they wouldn't give me a guppy because, or they wouldn't give me a goldfish because I only had a bowl. And how shit are they? And I'm sort of sitting there thinking, these aren't bad people. These aren't serial killers. These aren't mass murderers. They aren't bad. They are just in the wrong culture. Now think of the things that make you go, oh my God, people are ridiculous. And then find out where your line is. So I used to have rabbits and I was talking to someone about it and I just, as a throwaway sentence, said, the hutches. She went ape at me. Like, you can't keep rabbits in hutches. How I didn't explain it is my dad got a load of cabinets and they were 6 foot back to front. They'd been used for architecture plans. Big cabinets so they were 6 foot deep for these rolled up plans. And they were about 8 foot across, 6 foot deep, 8 foot across. And he made them into hutches for me. So I had like big 6x8 hutches for my guinea pigs and my rabbits. And they were outside in the summer in a nice spot with perfect temperature. And then they had a big run in the garden. And then in the winter, we rented a unit for them. So it was, for me, that was acceptable. But for her, like, any hutch was the limit. And I thought, well, yeah, she lets her rabbits run around the house and they've got the whole garden and stuff like that. That's my line. You know, my line for cruelty is a lot lower than hers. I don't keep rabbits now. I don't have any intention to keep rabbits. I'm afraid the only rabbits that come into this house are frozen in the freezer. And even then, that's like once in a blue moon. And we've got to say, well, where's our line? And what would make us step up our game? So find something that you don't know much about and see what you think. So if someone came to you and said they were keeping a snake in a 3 foot viv, would that make you go, oh my God, you're a bad keeper? Or would you go, it's a fair size? If someone was keeping a budgie in a cage, would that make you go mad or not? If someone had chickens in a very small coop, what's your imagined size on coop? And what I'm saying is something that you've maybe seen when you were younger or did when you were younger. And nowadays we know that's wrong or they need bigger or better. How would we cross that line ourselves? How would you get the average person? How would you, not anyone else, how would you want to be approached if you were keeping those animals and suddenly found out it was wrong? And can we try and be that to other fish keepers? I'm explaining that badly, but hopefully you get what I mean. Right, so guys, so this is a quick one. Went out today to conference. It was mostly looking at stress hormones. First bit I wanted was stress hormones in turtles. That was interesting. So my next thing is going to be looking at stress hormones in fish. I think it's a big area we could start looking at. It might be that in 10 years' time we can test our water and get metabolites of the stress hormones and actually test them. Test the water to see how stressed your fish out. That'd be quite interesting to see. Are your fish stressed? I'm getting barked at by my dog. So it'd be really interesting to see if we could do that. Where have we got? How about weekly 10% amounts of water change, so still frequent but low volume? Right, how do you calculate your water change? Sorry guys, I just noticed that one's going on in the comments. How would you calculate your water volume? Your water changes. So let's I have a pad. Let's do some maths. Sorry, guys. So let's take what the averages are. Off the top of my head, average KH is 6, which is about what, 110 parts per million. Calcium carbonate, or 110 milligrams per litre. I'll do it that way because that actually makes the maths easier. And let's say your nitrates out the tap are 20. Yeah, this is sort of where I'm going on that one. So let's look at the KH first. You'd have to know what your KH was at the end of the week. So let's say, let's do your nitrates first because that maths is a little bit easier. Your KH would depend on how much you're feeding. That would be the thing you'd have to deal with. But let's just look at your nitrates. Let's say you don't want it to go over 40 ppm, which is a number that I think has been plucked out of thin air. Because some fish need less, some fish can handle more. But let's say you don't want it to go over 40 ppm. So let's say you start the week at 20. You start your first week at 20. Fully cycled tank, you put your fish in. Because of your tap water, it's 20. You then, by the end of the week, you're at 40. And you do a 50% change. So remember, 50% of your water is 40 ppm. And 50% of the new stuff coming in is 20 ppm. 50% of the new stuff coming in is 20 ppm. So you're now going to average 30. Now remember, you added 20 in the first week. So by the end of that second week, you're at 50. You do a 50% change. So you've got 45 by the end of the third week. So already at the start of the third week. So in 2 weeks, adding 20 ppm each time, you've already jumped it over your limit at the start, never mind at the end. So it's all about how much waste your fish are producing. And that's a really difficult topic because there's so many variables, like how many plants you've got, how many fish you've got, what you're feeding, what percentage of protein you're feeding, how efficient your fish's digestion is, how efficient your filter is. So it's all this sort of thing. What I would do if you're worried about your water changes, find out what your pH and your KH and your nitrates are out the tap. Find out what the tank is at the end before you do a water change. Stick them up on the group and we'll do some maths. That's the easiest thing. And yeah, I would just get a pump and a hose, run when it's so much easier. That's what I do. So yeah, if anyone wants to, throw the numbers at us. We will play with the maths and we'll do it on the group so that other people can learn. Filter one. And here's one thing. Little bit of bite me lip when people go, I don't change my filter. I don't clean my filter out for months. It's fine. I only do anything when the flow's dropping. You're starting to burn your motor out when you do that, but that's not the point. What I would consider is you have waste sitting there. That waste is ammonia rich. It's ammonia locked up in there. You are then going to allow that to go into your tank. And because the bacteria are actually in the filter, it'll probably chuck out as nitrates. Very, very well could. If you find someone who's constantly complaining about having high nitrates in the tank, but not out the tap, they're not cleaning the filter. It's the quickest way to tell. If you have someone whose KH is tanking, it's normally because they've not cleaned the filter. They've got so much organic mass left in that filter. They've got so many bacterial processes going on in there that the KH is just being tanked. I personally, depends which tank, and that's the crucial thing. A lightly stocked fish tank every 2 to 3 weeks. A turtle tank twice a week. Or depending, normally just after I've fed them. or the day as I feed them, and then I give myself 24 hours to like mentally prepare for the aroma that will greet me. So yeah, it's a bit evil. I'm not a subscriber to the whole leave your filter uncleaned. The reason I don't touch my biological media very often at all. I'll give that a rinse out maybe twice a year, and it's the gentle rinse out. My sponges, see, that's the great thing. If you keep on top of it, then you just need to pop the lid off, take the nearest sponge, or your filter floss, just clean that. It's fine. I am a big fan of pre-filters. On some of the turtle tanks, I have in-water pre-filters. I normally make them out of pop bottles if I have to. So basically, the water goes through that, and the worst of the waste is actually just on that first section before it's even entered the filter itself. I can pull those out, give those a quick squeeze, and shove them back in really easy. And I'm a real big fan of that because of that reason. If you've got any just standard air-driven sponge filters, I actually put that, if you pop out the middle bit and push them over the intake, it's absolutely brilliant, especially if you've got any fish that are at risk of being sucked up in there. It's a little bit more work for the filter to do, so make sure you do take it out quite frequently and clean it. I use them on my turtle tanks because I had a really horrible case of a turtle pulled off the intake guard, and then her head got sucked up the pipe, and it was a couple of hours before I found her. She was alive. She didn't make it. She had pretty severe neurological deficits, shall we say. She hung around for about 2 weeks, but she was in a hell of a state. So the reason she didn't survive was I actually had her euthanized. There was no coming back from that. She'd been proper. And when I found her, when I got her out the pipe, her head it just swelled up really quickly. Yeah, she was in an awful state. So I am a bit paranoid about that with the turtles. So I tend to use sponge filters over them. So then all I need to do is turn off the filter, pop the whole sponge off, pull it out quickly because it does tend to let the dirt back out, and then just quick squeeze in a bucket of tank water, and then pop it back on. And then on those, I only open my filter every couple of months, but then I've never really had any problems with them. When I open them, even the filter floss is relatively clean. Relatively. But yeah, the little nitrate factories, if you leave them, they just sit in there and they just produce nitrates and use up all your KH and all that sort of thing. So I want that out. Crucially, also the bacteria factories. So if you've got E. coli forming, that's going to outcompete your good bacteria that you don't want. Yeah, as Charlie says, certain substrates will also kill your KH. They'll absolutely tank it. And they will also produce ammonia, some of them. So active substrates, generally, a lot of them, I should say, when you first put them in, absolutely leach ammonia. They are brilliant to cycle a tank, though. So I am quite a fan of that idea. If you have a heavy leaching substrate, start your tank off with that. Your filter will use that as a source of ammonia. You're going to get an artificial fall. So when we're talking about cycling, remember you look for your rise in ammonia, your fall in ammonia, but your corresponding rise in nitrites, your fall in nitrites, and then your rise of nitrates. If you have a heavily planted tank, you will get a rise in ammonia, a fall in ammonia, but you won't see the corresponding rise in nitrates. That's because the plants are using them all up. So just watch for that. You then might have to start dosing actual ammonia. So if you start to see your ammonia fall, but no nitrate rise, start dosing ammonia more than the plants can cope with. But remember, you've got a scenario where if your plants use up all your ammonia that's leaching out your substrate, and then you relatively lightly stock, you're probably not going to produce more ammonia with the fish than your substrate was leaching. So I don't know. Sometimes I'm just of the opinion that it's fine. I hate that word, but that you're going to be okay. The danger comes if you strip out all the plants, and you've got a problem because you've got no cycle. I think some plants are... I suspect Charlie's tank isn't cycled. I'll say that now. I don't think your heavily planted tanks are cycled, Charlie. I think the plants are just going, oh, pretty ammonia, thank you, sucking it all up. And yeah, it's one of those things. However, unless you suddenly remove all your plants, you're fine. The only thing is, I wouldn't trust your filter if you had transferred it to a blank tank. It's one of those things. So yes, Rowan, do your filters more often, please. It would be a good start. Right, I am going to try and show you guys something. You're probably going to see the mess that is my desk first. Yeah, it's fine. Right, let's see if I can manage to do that. Yep. I thought you put stuff here. You don't feed your shark tank enough to keep it cycled. Right, let's see if we can manage this one. What do we do? Can you see them? Those little things that the camera won't focus on. The baby axolotls. Come on, camera. Focus, 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 focus. Evil thing. If it would bloody focus, it would be really good because they've got little gills and everything now. Just starting to get gills and eyes and everything. Absolutely brilliant little buggers now. What filter have you got, Bronwyn? To be completely honest, there's probably someone on this conversation right now that has that filter and can help you out. Yeah, little blobs. Little axolotls. I ordered 10. I think there's about 17 in there. Oh, FX. Right. So, the 406. I've got the FX5. The 406, yeah, it's relatively straightforward. Turn off, there will be some way of turning off the flow back. So for me, I've got at the base of each one, I just turn the taps, just below where the taps come on. And then you just pop the top off, just take the two clasps off. You might have to wriggle this a bit. If it's sealed down, open up the taps a second, and then you might get a little bit of water spillage. Just shut it off really quickly. It just breaks the seal quickly. Yeah, I've never used the 406. I will let Sue talk you through that one. Yeah, the camera angle's off. It's fine. It's looking weird. It's not like it matters. You guys can just have a look out my vague darkness into my yard. At least it's not upside down or anything. Yes, you need to turn it off. So turn it off, undo the clasps. That should lift it up, but make sure you've either lifted your intake and outtake out the water, or you've turned the taps off, and then just you'll have a baskets of media. Just give them a quick rinse in tank water. Don't over clean it. In fact, I'd only clean half at a time and empty out all the gunky water. That would be my choice. Yeah. Just take the whole lot to the sink is another good plan. I can't because over the years I've cut, because like most of mine are second hand, and I've cut the pipe shorter and shorter and shorter. So for some of them, there's no wriggle room at all. So then I'd have to take everything off, and oh, it's just a nightmare. APS actually is one good thing. On some of them, you can actually pop the taps all the way out and then just carry the canister off. It's a good one with that one. Fluval, you can do it, but it's not as easy. But I do like my well, I like my FX5s. They're getting old. So yes, anyway, guys, I will love you and leave you there. I am spending most of tomorrow on the courses. So people who are waiting for the courses, they will this month and will be out tomorrow. Oh, sorry, last month will be out tomorrow. This month will be out towards the end of this week. People waiting on the aquarium boxes. I have done exactly sod all on them up to now this week. I will get on with that. People waiting on the books. I'm looking at one person in the comments. Yes, that is definitely being done as fast as I can. It is getting better. Yeah. Sounds good. Okay, guys. I will love you and leave you. I will probably see you over on the group in about 10 minutes because it always seems to happen. Hope you've enjoyed it. Hope I answered some of the questions on the low and no water change method. And I will speak to you soon. Bye bye.